Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time. Today we are opening a truly foundational text, one that gave an entire historical era its lasting name. Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner's 1873 novel, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today.
And this is a really important one. This deep dive is about understanding how the sudden, dizzying ascent of speculative capitalism after the Civil War didn't just generate wealth.
Right.
It fundamentally reshaped American political machinery, its values, its very identity. We are not just looking at a historical novel here.
No.
We're treating this book as an immediate, visceral diagnosis of a system in crisis.
That's the core mission. We're treating the novel, and particularly it's really cutting satire, not as just a funny anecdote or a simple morality play about a few weak characters.
It's so much more than that.
It is. We're looking at it as a robust systems diagnosis. Satire, when it's used this effectively, is capable of shining a light on structural truths about, corruption and perverse incentive structures.
Things that statistics or polite historical accounts often just completely miss.
Exactly. The goal here is a systems-level analysis of what happens when rapid wealth creation just separates itself entirely from tangible value.
And Twain and Warner, they documented the inner mechanics of American political and financial ambition back in the 1870s.
And the patterns they found?
They're still absolutely persistent today.
Okay, so to really appreciate this diagnosis, we need to quickly set the stage. Let's talk about the authors, Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, and Charles Dudley Warner.
Yeah, and this was, as you said earlier, a rushed project, a joint production conceived really quickly in late 1872, and then, boom, finished by April 1873.
That speed, I think, says something.
It does. It says they felt this critique was urgent. Yeah, and you can see the collaboration in the styles. Twain, he's the master of that, burlesque humor, the larger-than-life characters.
Colonel Beriah Sellers.
Of course. The delusional Hawkins family, the chaos of Washington, D.C. maneuvering, that's all Twain. But then you have Warner.
Right. He was a bit older, had practiced law, edited major newspapers.
Exactly. So he brought the structural complexity. He handled the more intricate legal and political elements, like the really specific details of Laura Hawkins' murder trial.
It's interesting. Twain later tried to create this clean separation, saying, Warner did the fiction and he just hurled in the facts.
But that wasn't really true. Warner himself admitted they hatched the plot day by day.
Yeah.
Their styles really did bleed together.
But the shared why was what mattered.
Absolutely. The point was to deliver a just scorching critique of the new political economic order that had emerged from the ashes of the Civil War.
And that post-war period, we're talking roughly 1865 to 1900. It was just a time of immense wrenching tension.
And accelerated change. Just think about the scale of it. You've got this sudden rise of social mobility, urbanization on a scale never seen before.
And the railroads, the massive boom in railroads, which became these huge corporate structures, bigger than anything America had ever seen.
Right, and large-scale manufacturing. It was completely unprecedented.
And just simmering beneath all of this furious, tangible expansion, there was this other thing, this intensified priority of getting rich.
Yeah, the old moral standards, the slower pace of antebellum commerce, they just were not equipped for this new scale of capital and, frankly, the new opportunities for graft.
And that's the crucial systemic failure right there. The sheer scale of these new problems, these massive government contracts, the access to the federal treasury, it just overwhelmed the old ways of governing.
Which were based on a much, much simpler economy. This system failure is what gives rise directly to the public scandals of President Grant's first term.
The Credit Mobilier Railroad scandal, the whiskey ring.
Yeah, historians weren't wrong to dub this period the era of good stealings. It's not an exaggeration.
And the book is absolutely packed with references to these real-life political earthquakes. They're just, thinly disguised.
Very thinly, like calling the famous Tweed ring scandal the weed ring, or swapping out Oakes Ames, the congressman at the heart of Credit Mobilier, for the fictional Congressman Fair Oaks.
So it's basically journalism. It's a work of immediate journalistic rage dressed up as fiction.
And that intensity brings us to the title itself. The Gilded Age. People used other names for the period.
Age of cynicism, age of consequence.
Right. But Twain and Warner's term is the one that stuck.
Yeah.
It ended up defining the period for all of history.
What's so powerful about that term gilded is its precision. It's not gold.
No, that's the whole point. It implies a thin surface layer of prosperity, this beautiful shiny facade.
But it's masking rot, decay, and cheap metal underneath. The novel's lasting power is in its prescient emphasis on the gap between appearance and reality.
It perfectly captures a society obsessed with the metrics of success, regardless of the integrity underneath it all.
And it's kind of a historical irony that the phrase only gained broad currency decades later, right?
Yeah, in the 1920s and 30s, when people looked back on this period and needed a single concise term to encapsulate its nature. But the core thesis of the novel, that's the definitive diagnosis the authors wanted to deliver.
And it's the framework for our analysis today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack that core thesis. What, in the simplest terms, did Twain and Warner say was fundamentally wrong with this new system?
Well, they stated it pretty plainly. Unchecked speculation and political corruption are not, moral deviations from the norm.
They're not bugs, they're features.
Exactly. They emerge naturally when systems are designed to reward appearance, access, and ambitious scheming over things like integrity and tangible production.
And the book creates this explicit contrast, doesn't it? Morally and economically.
It does. It's speculators versus producers. And the speculators aren't just seen as risky businessmen. They're carrying what the book calls a baggage of antisocial meaning. They're the new aristocracy of risk.
Okay, so if the thesis is that the system rewards appearance over actual production, let's look at the mechanisms, and we should probably start with the psychological environment.
Right.
Twain, in a preface, called the mindset of the era all-pervading speculativeness. That sounds less like a tactic and more like a cultural disease.
It absolutely was a national condition. But what's fascinating is that Twain didn't see it as purely evil. He argued it was both bad and good.
How so?
Well, good, because that drive forever on towards some point or other which is ahead, it prevents stagnation. It's the restless energy of the American spirit.
But the downside, the systemic risk, must be massive.
Oh, it is. The drive is bad because the chosen point is often badly chosen, and then the individual is wrecked. This speculative mindset encourages young men, even earnest ones like Philip Sterling,
Right.
to expect a fortune by the omission of some of the regular processes which have been appointed from of old.
In other words, why spend 20 years building a business
When you can make a fortune in 20 days with a well-placed bribe or a lucky land deal. This system incentivizes skipping the line.
And the perfect foundation for this delusion is the Hawkins family's land scheme.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Silas Hawkins, the patriarch, his entire family's future is built on a single, worthless 75,000-acre tract of land.
In the Knobs of East Tennessee, a region the book famously compares unfavorably to Nazareth, where, absolutely no good thing was expected.
The land is the perfect symbol of illusory wealth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are desperately poor, but they're sitting on this paper wealth, millions upon millions, that exists only in their imagination.
And the moment that solidifies their ruin comes really early on.
It does. Hawkins is offered a very real $10,000 for the land, a sum that would have saved them from poverty, stabilized their whole family.
And he refuses.
He refuses.
And why? It seems insane.
Because he's convinced by a hallucination, a dream of iron speculation, something he knows nothing about, that the land is actually worth $250,000.
So he actively believes he has escaped ruin by refusing the cash.
When in fact he has just cemented their fate in these worthless paper promises.
And the real tragedy is that this tract of land becomes a kind of curse that defines the children's lives.
It does. Washington Hawkins, the son, he's a good guy, he's well-meaning, but he spends his best years dreaming up useless inventions and just waiting for this enormous wealth to materialize.
Instead of seeking any kind of permanent, productive work.
Exactly.
That's such a profound observation about the corrosive power of expectation. It's the waiting that destroys you.
And Washington realizes it, but way too late in the novel. He laments that they might have been happy if they had just accepted our poverty at first and gone contentedly to work.
But the speculative fever had been bred into them. Their parents taught them to wait.
And if Silas Hawkins represents the founding delusion, then Colonel Beriah Sellers, he represents the active, chaotic energy of the age.
He is the novel's most famous archetype, for sure. The chaotic heart of the speculative fever, powered by what the book calls unbounded reliance upon human promises.
There's millions in it.
That's it. It's the catchphrase of the Gilded Age. It embodies Sellers' relentless, unshakable optimism.
And his schemes are always enormous, but totally baseless. The Salt Lake Pacific Extension Railroad, the Columbus River Slackwater Navigation Company.
He actually secured a $200,000 appropriation for that navigation company, right?
Yeah.
Before the work just stopped.
He did. its ambition completely detached from gravity. But what makes Sellers so brilliant as a character is his genuine kindness, which somehow excuses his relentless untruthfulness.
Yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's just completely detached from reality.
Exactly. Warner analyzed his character perfectly, saying his untruthfulness was born of the imagination and not of the heart. He isn't malicious.
He's just so divorced from reality that he truly believes the impossible is just around the corner. He even praises the fictional village of Corruptionville.
Noting it was named after Congress itself, without even realizing he's just casually insulted the entire system he is trying to exploit.
But his optimism, while it's charming on the page, is systemically destructive.
Oh, absolutely. He ruined both himself and Hawkins through his sugar speculation, holding on too long for higher rates, which of course forced them to sell at the absolute bottom.
His character perfectly illustrates how blind faith in an imaginary market creates very real-world financial ruin. He is the ultimate, if well-meaning, con artist of hope.
And moving from that pure speculator archetype to the necessary mechanism of institutional capture, we get to Laura Hawkins.
Her story is fascinating. Her transition from a betrayed woman seeking justice to this powerful Washington lobbyist. It's one of the novel's sharpest pieces of systems analysis.
It really is. She's seeking power after being misused by Colonel Selby, and she goes about it with this astonishing calculation.
She understands the capital requires more than just charm. It requires intelligence.
The novel details how she puts herself through a tireless and elaborate course of reading to gain an effective social presence.
She is actively building her capital, and that capital isn't money.
No, it's knowledge, presentation, and access.
Hmm.
She quickly grasps the true currency of Washington. Money or beauty will open any door.
And another character, Harry Brierly, he observes that she can use her fascination, her social and personal power, to push measures right through Congress.
She doesn't have the financial depth of a major financier, but she has the leverage of immediate personal influence.
And her attempt to secure Congressman Trollope's support for the Knobs Industrial University bill is a complete masterclass in lobbying.
Oh, it is. Trollope knows the bill is a fraud, but she forces his hand. She doesn't argue the merits of the bill at all.
No, she reminds him of his own past graft.
That scene is so revealing of the normalized corruption. Laura exposes his vote for the steamship subsidy bill, which was a known public fraud, and points out that he accepted stock in his brother-in-law's name.
She even had a witness in the closet. The source material says she is playing a desperate game.
And she is. She leverages past ethical compromises, not policy arguments, to secure future policy results. She proves that, in the Gilded Age, past sins are a form of capital.
And this leads directly into the next pillar of the system, political corruption as just normalized procedure.
And Twain and Warner's most profound creation here is Senator Dilworthy, the perfected spoilsman. He is Laura's opposite in a way.
Mm-hmm.
He masks his intentions with this relentless, almost religious piety.
Dilworthy's strategy is a perfect example of systemic hypocrisy. He insists his true motivation is always philanthropy for benefiting the colored race.
And he uses these camp terms which the senator employed, perhaps unconsciously and mistook maybe, for religion. Dresses his greed in high moral clothes.
And he has a guiding principle that justifies everything.
He does. He will never push a private interest if it is not justified and ennobled by some larger public good. This is the systemic camouflage.
The public good, the University Bill for Freedmen, is just the noble story that allows him to execute the land grab and appropriation scheme.
In his view, the public is just as calculated and cynical. He sees the great public as weak-minded and sentimental.
He says they love to gush, especially over a case of persecution like newspaper attacks on their bill.
So he actively weaponizes negative press. He knows the sympathy it generates will outweigh the loss of a few timid votes. It's a kind of political jujitsu that uses public sentiment against the public interest.
So the final piece of this archetypal puzzle, it's the financial lubricant that makes the whole machine move.
Credit and leverage, replacing labor and value creation.
The authors included this incredibly sharp passage defining the era's financial foundation. They declare, beautiful credit, the foundation of modern society.
And they illustrate this concept with a character who embodies the new definition of wealth. They quote a speculator saying, what was it?
I wasn't worth a cent 2 years ago, and now I owe $2 million.
Yes, that debt is his capital. His wealth is entirely based on leverage, trust, and the speculative value of his promises. It's completely divorced from any actual productive output or earned resources.
That is the definition of a house of cards.
And it means that many of these prosperous households, like the Bolton family, Philip Sterling's love interest family, were built entirely on quicksand,
Their luxury and stability hung on business risks, contingencies.
liable to fail in a sudden panic. The system rewards leveraging promises, not accumulating tangible resources through honest labor. The Gilded Age is the age of the leveraged man.
Okay, so we've established the key archetypes of ambition and delusion. Now we can use those characters to map the operating system itself.
The mechanics of graft, how you convert a speculative dream into cold, hard cash from the federal treasury.
So if we treat the whole process like an economic pipeline, who are the essential moving parts? How do they interact to move taxpayer money from the treasury to the speculator's pocket?
Well, you have four essential groups of actors in this graft machine. First, you have the speculators.
The Hawkinses, Sellers, Brierley.
Right. They generate the raw, often delusional idea. They provide the initial pressure and optimism. Second, you have the politicians.
Dilworthy, Trollope, Buckstone. They control the access and the flow of appropriations.
Then third, the lobbyists, like Laura Hawkins. They're the essential bridge, applying that targeted pressure and leverage to unlock the political gatekeepers.
And the fourth group.
The financiers and contractors, like Bigler and Pennybacker. They provide the necessary structure and, critically, the initial capital that has to be secured through government appropriation to make the idea real.
And their incentives are all perfectly aligned.
Perfectly aligned in a highly perverse, self-reinforcing way. They all want rapid enrichment. Sellers sees whole Atlantic oceans of cash in it. The ultimate goal is accessing the federal treasury.
And this is where the political cynicism is just laid bare. There's that line from Mrs. Schoonmaker's husband.
Oh, it's brutal.
Yeah.
He observes that Confederates are just as eager to get at the treasury as Unionists. The massive economic opportunities of the Gilded Age basically dissolved Civil War animosities.
All in the mutual pursuit of a quick appropriation.
Exactly.
And to move the money through that pipeline, you need the right dominant narrative.
You do. The system has to sustain itself through stories of progress, opportunity, and inevitability. The Knobs Industrial University Bill is, on its face, for the benefit of 4 million newly freed slaves. A noble, undeniable cause.
But the novel just strips away that noble veneer to show the stark reality underneath.
The stated purpose of the project educating freedmen is entirely secondary to securing the money itself. The mindset of the contractors and politicians, Twain and Warner stress, is that it made little difference what it was appropriated for, so long as you got hold of it.
The purpose is just the moral camouflage. It's the key that unlocks the federal treasury and allows the graft machine to start processing the funds.
And this mechanism then feeds an institutional feedback loop that is, I think, maybe the most destructive aspect of the whole Gilded Age system.
How so?
The novel details how political offices become a streamlined machine for sucking up the taxpayers' money.
And who enables this? The book is pretty harsh on the voters.
It is. It critiques the stupid, venal, or apathetic voters. The exposure of corruption, rather than driving mass reform, often just leads to mass disillusionment about politics.
People get so cynical that they just abandon power to those who are already entrenched.
Exactly. The ones who understood the virtues of addition, division, and silence.
That phrase, addition, division, and silence, is one of the most chilling diagnoses in the entire book. What does that system's calculus really mean in practice?
It's the mechanism of self-preservation for the corrupt insider. You add the profits from the appropriation, you divide the spoils among all the necessary actors who made the deal happen.
And you maintain absolute silence about the entire mechanic.
Right, and the cynicism, it discourages genuine reformers, people like Ruth Bolton's family friends, from ever even entering the arena. When the process seems inevitably dirty, good people opt out.
And the system's ability to just roll on unchecked is reinforced.
It's a system that literally feeds on moral fatigue.
But this machine, this relentless system of appropriation and speculation, it isn't benign even to its most successful participants.
Not at all. It uses and then ruthlessly discards its own actors. It proves that chasing illusory fortune is always corrosive.
The machine consumes time, money, and idealism, and it just leaves wreckage in its wake.
Look at Laura Hawkins. She's overwhelmed and terror-stricken when her bill fails and she's indicted for murder. Or Dilworthy, the perfected spoilsman, he's ruined politically when he's eventually implicated in a public scandal.
Despite all his meticulous attempts to maintain that pious veneer.
And even Washington Hawkins, the well-meaning idealist consumed by the Tennessee land drain, he's physically destroyed by it.
Right. The novel describes how the suspense of Laura's trial and the ultimate failure of their bill rapidly ages him. His hair turns gray.
His last hope, his time, his idealism, all of it utterly consumed. The system extracts a high price from everyone who enters, even the successful or the merely hopeful. It is an engine of disillusionment.
And when we hear contemporary analysts talk about a new Gilded Age, it's because they're recognizing that these structural patterns,
That Twain and Warner identified are not quaint historical anomalies.
no, they're persistent economic and political behaviors that reassert themselves whenever the regulatory framework weakens.
Let's start with financialization. It's the modern heir to beautiful credit. The book's concept of the $2 million debtor, that divorce of wealth from production, is the perfect template for modern speculative economies.
It really does capture the central disconnect. Today, wealth is accumulated through, complex, highly leveraged financial engineering or through market dominance that's basically achieved rent-seeking status.
Rather than through creating tangible goods, the sudden opulence achieved by means that could not have classified among any of the regular occupations of life back in 1873.
Whether it was a worthless land claim or a rig stock corner.
It's mirrored today in volatile, rapid wealth accumulation driven by, highly esoteric financial products or massive, quick capital infusions into high-risk, high-return ventures. The underlying fever of skipping the regular processes remains identical.
And when we talk about the mechanics of institutional capture, Laura Hawkins' playbook is chillingly relevant.
It is. Her system of securing votes by leveraging past ethical failures, or just by making the necessary side arrangements, it perfectly reflects current dynamics. Policy success still hinges entirely on access and backroom influence.
Often bypassing public debate entirely.
And think about the level of detailed political engagement the novel describes in Washington, D.C. People were introduced by state, emphasizing their representative role. The women especially were constant, aggressive advocates for someone's advancement.
Or they were violently espousing or denouncing measures as they affected a relative or a friend.
That's a description of a city perpetually vying for influence. It mirrors the constant stream of high-powered interest groups, corporate lobbyists, and policy entrepreneurs today.
Where the sheer volume of access determines the outcomes.
Policy success often comes down to whose advocate is most aggressive and has the best leverage on the most critical gatekeepers, just like Laura did with Congressman Trollope.
And this brings us back to the normalization of graft, that self-excusing rationalization that, well, that's just how things work.
Let's revisit that stunning exchange where Congressman Trollope defends his acceptance of stock in a known fraudulent bill. He says some of the best and purest men in Congress took that stock in that way.
That is the sound of systemic toxicity.
It is. Because if the best and purest men are participating in these, minor ethical violations, it functionally distracts from the systemic problem.
It makes the small abuses seem acceptable, like a cost of doing business, and that maintains the institutional status quo.
And it allows the politician to believe they are morally average, even while participating in profound corruption. It's how the entire system avoids necessary structural reform.
And critically, Twain and Warner identified this dangerous misdirection of critique that we still struggle with today.
They did. The novel, by focusing so intensely on the corrupt officials and lobbyists, the parasites in the National Asylum for the Helpless as the DC had become, it deflected attention away from the need to control the ravenousness of free enterprise itself.
So, by framing the problem as individual moral failure or political parasitism, the novel implicitly supported the idea that laissez-faire capitalism was a kind of natural law.
Untouchable by structural controls. The enduring message for us, then, is that you always have to follow the money, whether hard cash or tax break, and not the parade of bombast.
If you only look at the Trollops and the Dilworthys, you miss the structure that created them in the first place.
This deep dive into the Gilded Age forces us to confront a tension that is, I think, central to all systems analysis. Where does systemic causation end and individual blame begin?
And the authors, they were products of their time, right? Rooted in Victorian morality. They tended to see problems as a flabbiness of moral fiber.
A personal failing that could be reversible by a willing conscience. They really expected virtue to win out in the end.
Yet, the narrative structure of the novel directly contradicts this Victorian morality. Take Philip Sterling.
A perfect example. He is earnest, diligently educated, he possesses great personal mettle, but he still caught the fever of speculation.
So the novel inadvertently demonstrates that the environment, the hyper-speculative incentive structure of the entire age, dictates behavior.
And it often overwhelms personal virtue. You could be diligent like Philip or honest like Clay, but if you tie your fortune to the national craze, you are likely to be wrecked regardless of your conscience.
Which is why the system, and not the morality of any single character, is the true villain of the book. And this systemic failure is why satire was the perfect literary tool for them to use.
It had to be satire. The real-life scandals of Grant's first term were so extreme, the sources note that exaggeration was both hard and unnecessary.
You couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't. The broad-axe satire and the frenetic quality of the humor were essential to match the sheer absurdity of the political and economic issues of the decade.
Satire provided the distance needed to talk about corruption that defied conventional realism.
A formal, polite literary account would have sounded completely unbelievable. The humor made the unbelievable truths digestible.
And a key systemic outcome we have to analyze is how moral language itself just collapses under these speculative incentives.
We see this most clearly with Senator Dilworthy, who uses the genuine need for philanthropy for the freedmen as the narrative cover for a massive land grab.
He weaponizes ethics. He weaponizes social justice causes.
And by misusing that high-minded moral language, like his argument that he would only pursue private interests if they were justified and ennobled by some larger public good, he systematically destroys the credibility of genuine reform efforts.
Because when a senator uses the education of newly emancipated slaves as a cover for a private appropriation scheme,
It makes everyone cynical about all public endeavors.
the result is that the genuine efforts, like those of Ruth Bolton, who insists on achieving equality of power and only enters medicine after a considerable struggle,
Her efforts stand out as these fragile exceptions to a deeply corrupted rule. Her path, one of production and demonstrable value, is made unnecessarily difficult by a system that just rewards the shortcut artists.
Now, despite the novel's brilliance, we have to acknowledge its historical blind spots, which were also, the systemic limitations of its authors.
That's right. For instance, they focused almost entirely on high-level political and financial maneuvering, and they entirely ignored the bottom-scale workers.
That's a huge oversight. While they were writing about the Age of Gold, for the vast majority of the swelling urban workforce, the era was actually an age of iron.
Marked by crushing weight, economic hardship, and mounting resentments that would culminate in the massive Great Strike of 1877, just 4 years after the book was published.
Their narrow focus on political corruption at the top completely missed the growing conflict between capital and labor at the bottom.
And furthermore, the analysis points out that by focusing so heavily on generic corruption, the novel kind of blurred important differences between the political parties.
Specifically, they failed to offer context on the crucial policy debates regarding emancipated slaves and financial policy.
And for our audience, we should probably quickly define that financial policy issue.
Of course, the primary financial policy debate of the time revolved around currency, specifically whether to retire or continue circulating the greenbacks, the paper money issued during the Civil War.
Right. The bankers and creditors, they wanted to contract the money supply and return to the gold standard. That would make debts harder to pay and increase the value of their existing capital.
But farmers and debtors, they wanted to keep the paper currency, the greenbacks in circulation, to expand the money supply,
which would make it easier to pay off their massive railroad and land debts.
The novel's failure to engage with this highly charged economic policy debate, which affected millions of poor farmers and working people, demonstrated that myopia.
By focusing purely on corruption, the authors inadvertently encouraged the very cynicism we talked about earlier, the idea that power should be abandoned to the insiders, undermining respect for suffrage, and allowing this perpetual disillusionment to thrive among reformers.
They focused on the flabbiness of moral fiber rather than on the massive structural qualitative shift in economic power that was taking place.
And that's a key takeaway for us. The satire was brilliant at diagnosing the symptoms of greed, but maybe struggled to identify the root structural causes of economic inequality.
The lasting genius of the Gilded Age is that it wasn't a historical footnote.
No, it created the enduring vocabulary for understanding how the intertwined systems of wealth and power operate, a vocabulary we use every time we talk about a speculative bubble or political access today.
We see the tragedy of wealth without value in the Hawkins family. Their entire lives were a lifetime of suffering, dependence, and postponed happiness, all driven by the phantom promise of a worthless, untaxed tract of land.
It proves that chasing sudden fortune, that illusory win, is a powerful yet profoundly corrosive force that just destroys productive capacity.
We see power without accountability in the portrait of Senator Dilworthy. His success demonstrates that appearance calculated self-restraint, and the careful use of hypocrisy are significantly more valuable than integrity in securing and maintaining political power.
In a system that rewards narrative over substance, he teaches us that sometimes the most dangerous corruption wears the mask of piety.
And finally, we see the danger of optimism without grounding through carnal cellars.
His contagious delusion, there's millions in it, embodies the national tendency to substitute boundless financial imagination for earned reality.
It's a self-destructive system built on air, but air that feels intoxicatingly real right up until the point of collapse.
Twain and Warner provided a fundamental warning. They said we must constantly analyze the protein energies of social power, the shifting, shape-changing ways money and access influence everything.
And we have to calculate in whose interest it truly operates, urging us always to follow the money, not the parade of bombast.
So we leave you with the deep dive reflection question, one that Twain and Warner force us to ask about our own era.
If a system is perfectly designed to reward rapid enrichment and political maneuvering over genuine industry, hard work, and honest production, what truly is the ultimate meaning of progress inside that distorted framework?
That deep dive was grounded in the seminal work of Mark Twain, Samuel L. Clemens, and Charles Dudley Warner. We highly encourage you to read the full text of The Gilded Age, a tale of today, or to borrow it from your local library.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoyed this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.